The ocean. It's serene, it's breathtaking, and it can be deadly. From Maya Thornton's terrifying solo kayak yoga attack by a massive great white off South Africa to Maria Santos and Daniel Reyes's desperate struggle against an oceanic white-tip in the storm-tossed waters of the Bahamas, these 6 harrowing encounters show us how quickly calm seas can erupt into high-stakes battles for survival, testing skill, courage, and the raw instinct to stay alive. On September 12, 2025, 34-year-old adventure instructor Maya Thornton paddled her bright orange kayak into a secluded bay off Gansbaai, South Africa, a hidden stretch of coastline known more to local fishermen than tourists, where jagged rocks jutted from the sea and the water was often unsettled by sudden currents and hidden shoals. The morning air was crisp but held the tang of salt and seaweed, and Maya, drawn to the solitude after a week of crowded adventure tours, had chosen this quiet cove to practice her kayak yoga, a routine she had perfected over years of combining balance, core strength, and the calm rhythm of waves, unaware that this day would turn the practice into a battle for survival. Recent storms had left the water murky, a swirling mix of sand and debris, and schools of small fish darted erratically near the colony of seals she had glimpsed earlier, their sleek shapes moving with sudden bursts of energy as if responding to some unseen predator beneath the surface. The bay was silent, except for the soft slap of the paddle against the water and the occasional cry of a gull circling overhead, and Maya, inhaling deeply, lifted her arms into a slow, deliberate stretch, pressing her feet against the kayak's deck and closing her eyes briefly, feeling the rhythm of her own breathing synchronize with the gentle rise and fall of the sea around her. She had just leaned into a forward bend, extending her spine and balancing on the narrow vessel, when the water beneath her seemed to explode with sudden force, a shadow larger than anything she had imagined surging upward. In a heartbeat, the massive head of a 16-foot great white shark broke the surface, its jaws opening with terrifying speed and precision, clamping onto her right arm with a bone-crushing force that shredded her wetsuit and ripped through muscle and sinew with merciless efficiency. Maya's scream tore through the salt-laden air as she was violently thrown from her kayak into the churning, blood-streaked water, the bright orange of her craft spinning away from her grasp, bobbing like a lifeline just out of reach. Panic surged, but instinct and years of training kicked in, and she fought to keep her head above water as warm blood spread rapidly around her, clouding the bay in a dark, ominous swirl. The shark circled immediately, its massive dorsal fin cutting through the waves with predatory grace, snapping and testing its catch with repeated calculated bites that tore at the remaining connection to her arm, and sent searing pain radiating through her body with each impact. Maya's lungs burned as she kicked frantically, keeping her torso upright in the chaos, her fingers grasping at jagged rock protrusions just beneath the surface while adrenaline and fear surged in equal measure, sharpening her senses to every movement and ripple around her. She remembered the survival drills, the emergency maneuvers she had drilled countless times in calm waters, and she angled her legs and thrust outward with powerful measured strokes, moving toward a rocky outcrop that rose from the bay like a jagged fortress, her body slick with a mixture of seawater and blood, her arm dangling uselessly but still clinging, impossibly, to life. Each second felt like an eternity, the shark's shadow never far behind, its movements fluid and terrifyingly precise, and she could feel the current tugging against her, threatening to pull her into deeper water where escape would be impossible. The instinct to survive became a singular focus, and despite the pain and the terror, she propelled herself forward, scraping against jagged stones and struggling to find purchase on slick, algae-covered surfaces as the predator's attention never fully left her. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last, the shark testing her resolve with sudden bursts and lunges, and each time it snapped, water erupted around her in chaotic explosions, throwing her off balance and forcing her to fight even harder to stay upright and keep moving. Finally, after what seemed like an interminable struggle, the creature retreated, slipping silently back into the murky depths with a final flick of its massive tail, leaving behind only the rippling red stain of the attack and the sharp, ragged scent of fear and blood. Maya, trembling and gasping, clung to the rocks with one remaining hand, her body slick with seawater, sweat, and coagulating blood, the pain in her lost arm radiating in waves that stole her breath and threatened to collapse her into the waves from which she had narrowly escaped. Her training, her mental discipline, and the sheer force of survival instinct had carried her through. And when emergency responders arrived within minutes, alerted by a passing fishing boat that had seen the initial commotion, they found her exhausted, shivering, and covered in blood, but alive. Her courage and resourcefulness served as shields that had kept her from a fatal encounter with one of the ocean's most formidable predators. The paramedics worked quickly, stabilizing her, applying a tourniquet, and guiding her onto the stretcher as she stared blankly at the sky. The bay now eerily quiet, the seals scattered, and the sun glinting off the water with deceptive calm. At the hospital, surgeons worked tirelessly to save her life and prevent further complications from shock and blood loss. But the damage to her right arm was irreparable, leaving her with a permanent reminder of the encounter that had pushed her body, mind, and spirit to their absolute limits. The incident, which rippled through the adventure sports community and news outlets, became a harrowing example of the vulnerability humans face in the ocean, even when armed with skill, experience, and caution. It also underscored the necessity of strict safety measures, especially for those practicing solo water activities in areas known for apex predators. For Maya Thornton, the attack was more than a test of physical endurance. It was a confrontation with raw, unrelenting nature, a lesson in survival, and a story that would forever mark her life with both tragedy and triumph, illustrating the fragile line between adventure and peril in the wild, unpredictable sea. On August 17, 2023, 34-year-old Coast Guard Petty Officer Ryan Mitchell moved cautiously through waist-deep water along the Florida Gulf Coast, the sun high and harsh overhead, casting glittering patterns across the shallow sandbar where a small fishing vessel had run aground during the night's storm. The vessel, listing precariously to one side, had drawn the attention of local authorities after a distress call from a passing boater, and Ryan, an experienced officer accustomed to the unpredictable dangers of shallow water patrols, stepped forward with measured caution, scanning the water for submerged obstacles while keeping his hand on the rail of the boat that had brought him closer. The Gulf was restless that morning, small waves breaking over sandbanks and stirring clouds of suspended sediment, turning the usually clear water into a murky expanse where shadows moved with deceptive speed. Schools of baitfish, frightened by the passing commercial trawlers and the abrupt noise of engines, darted in tight silver swarms, their sudden bursts of movement sending ripples through the water. While overhead gulls cried out and wheeled, the air electric with activity and the sense that the day would not unfold as routine. Ryan had taken only a few cautious steps toward the hull when the water around him shimmered with an unnatural energy, the currents shifting in a way that made him pause. Before he could fully register the movement, a massive shape erupted from the murky depths, a 13-foot tiger shark, sleek and muscular, its stripes dark against the sunlit water, lunging upward with a precision honed by countless hunts. Its jaws clamped onto his right thigh with overwhelming force, tearing through neoprene and muscle in a single terrifying instant, sending a jolt of pain so sharp that it stole his breath and knocked him off balance. He was hurled backward, his body striking the shallow sand beneath him with bone-jarring impact as seawater filled his mask and blurred the world into a spinning haze of pain, blood, and terror. The shark's immense weight pressed down as it twisted, testing its hold. The predatory intelligence in its movements unmistakable, and Ryan's training kicked in despite the shock, forcing him to focus on survival, even as his legs trembled under the sudden, catastrophic injury. His fellow officers, standing on the patrol boat a few meters away, shouted warnings and swung their oars, striking the water with desperate force. But the tiger shark, drawn by the scent of blood, circled with aggressive, deliberate movements, its dorsal fin slicing through the water in long, controlled arcs, ready to strike again. Ryan, gasping and dizzy, remembered the flotation buoy clipped to his belt during the patrol, and with a Herculean effort he reached for it with his uninjured hand, flipping it into the water and grabbing it firmly. Using the buoy as both a shield and a support, he kicked and thrashed toward deeper water, his body slick with a mixture of seawater and blood, each stroke a battle against pain and exhaustion. The shark followed, circling, testing the distance with sudden lunges, snapping its jaws just shy of reaching him, until finally, as Ryan's momentum carried him past the shallow sandbar, the predator released its hold, disappearing back into the depths with a final powerful flick of its tail, leaving behind only the crimson trail that marked the intensity of the attack. Pulled aboard the patrol boat by his colleagues, Ryan collapsed onto the deck, his body trembling violently from shock and blood loss, his right leg mangled and soaked through with a dark, heavy stain that would leave both physical and psychological scars. Paramedics arrived within minutes, applying field dressings, stabilizing his blood pressure, and moving him quickly to the ambulance waiting at the nearby dock, while the officers remained tense and vigilant, scanning the water for any sign of the predator, their training and discipline tested by the sudden violence of nature. At the hospital, surgeons worked meticulously to repair the extensive muscle damage, and though Ryan's life was spared, he would carry lasting impairment and a prominent scar along his thigh, a permanent reminder of the raw force of a top predator unleashed in waters humans often consider familiar and safe. The incident reverberated through the Coast Guard community, prompting immediate reviews of safety protocols for shallow water patrols in areas known to harbor large predators, including the use of flotation devices, team coordination, and emergency response drills designed to minimize exposure to sudden attacks. Ryan's colleagues, both shaken and inspired by his endurance and quick thinking, recounted the event in detail, noting how his calm under extreme pressure and deliberate actions in the face of catastrophic injury had prevented what could have been a fatal encounter. The tiger shark itself remained an unseen presence beneath the Gulf, a reminder of the unpredictable nature of the environment and the quiet menace hidden beneath the sunlit waves that could strike without warning, transforming even the most routine duties into high-stakes confrontations with raw, natural power. For Ryan Mitchell, the attack was more than a brush with mortality. It was a confrontation with instinct, skill, and the unforgiving laws of the sea, a harrowing ordeal that tested his physical strength, mental fortitude, and the limits of human survival under duress. Every movement, every calculated stroke toward the buoy and the deeper water had been dictated by a single imperative: live. The memory of the shark's immense jaws clamping down, the sudden jolt of pain, the spinning blur of the Gulf around him, would remain etched in his mind forever, an indelible marker of vulnerability and resilience intertwined. By the time he was discharged from the hospital, the incident had become a case study in survival against apex predators, demonstrating how experience, training, and presence of mind could bridge the narrow gap between life and death when confronted by one of the ocean's most efficient hunters, and serving as a stark lesson that even familiar waters could conceal a deadly, unpredictable force waiting to test human limits. On August 14, 2024, 38-year-old Marcus LeBlanc navigated the swollen bayous of southern Louisiana with careful, measured strokes, his small canoe cutting through murky, debris-filled floodwaters that had turned familiar streets and fields into a vast, treacherous labyrinth of currents and hidden obstacles. Weeks of unusually heavy rain had pushed water levels far beyond their normal boundaries, submerging fences, roads, and low-lying homes. Locals had been warned repeatedly to avoid venturing into the surging rivers and bayous unless absolutely necessary. Marcus, a longtime resident known for his calm demeanor and strong knowledge of the waterways, had taken it upon himself to reach neighbors stranded on rooftops or trapped behind rising walls of water, his canoe loaded with supplies, and his mind focused on helping others while remaining alert to the unpredictable power of the flood. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of mud and vegetation, and every paddle stroke sent ripples through the opaque water, revealing glimpses of sunken trees, tangled roots, and floating debris that threatened to snag the vessel or capsize it entirely. For hours, Marcus moved slowly but steadily, keeping his body low and his eyes scanning the water for signs of danger, aware that the floodwaters had displaced not only furniture and vehicles, but wildlife as well, sending creatures into unfamiliar territory where they had not been seen for generations. Fish darted in frantic schools, their movements erratic among the submerged branches, while turtles and snakes occasionally broke the surface, startled by the intrusion into their temporary domain. Marcus had almost reached a small cluster of houses when the water beneath him shifted with a sudden, unnatural force, a powerful surge that seemed to come from nowhere, lifting his canoe and tilting it alarmingly. Before he could react fully, a massive bull shark, carried upriver by the swollen floodwaters and disoriented by floating debris, lunged upward with terrifying speed and precision, its blunt, muscular body colliding with the hull and sending splinters of wood and spray into the air. Its jaws clamped around Marcus's leg with merciless strength, tearing through fabric and muscle in a single violent motion, and in the same heartbeat he was dragged under the canoe, the water closing over him in a cold, suffocating rush that stole his breath and filled his senses with chaos. From the rooftops of nearby homes, terrified witnesses could see only the struggle, the splash of water, the frantic thrashing, and the bright orange of the canoe tipping dangerously. But they were powerless to intervene, shouting and gesturing while trying to maintain balance on the slippery, submerged surfaces around them. Marcus fought instinctively, kicking and twisting in the floodwater, attempting to release the shark's grip even as currents pushed him sideways, dragging him into deeper, faster-flowing channels where escape seemed impossible. The debris around him, broken branches and floating remnants of destroyed structures cut against his body, tearing at skin and clothing, adding to the confusion and pain as the shark continued to twist and pull, a perfect predator exploiting the sudden vulnerability of a human caught far from safety. Panic surged through him, but training and experience gave him fleeting moments of clarity. He struggled toward air pockets beneath overturned debris, trying to surface and regain control, yet the sheer force of the bull shark and the relentless pull of the floodwaters made every effort feel like swimming against a hurricane. Rescue teams arrived within minutes, their boats cutting through the tangled water with urgency, flashlights and spotlights sweeping across the bayou. But by the time they reached the area, only the wreckage remained. Marcus's canoe, battered and half-submerged, and personal effects floating in the current, drifting like small, silent markers of the sudden violence that had occurred. The water itself, once familiar and navigable, seemed to close over the scene with deceptive calm, hiding the predator and erasing any trace of the struggle beneath its opaque surface. Experts later noted that bull sharks, capable of tolerating freshwater and often displaced by flooding events, could travel far upriver during such periods, turning rivers, canals, and bayous that would normally be considered safe into unpredictable hunting grounds, where the laws of nature overrode human expectation and control. Marcus's disappearance became a stark reminder of how quickly familiar environments could transform into deadly terrain when extreme weather and apex predators intersected. The tragedy sparked renewed warnings from local authorities and wildlife experts, emphasizing that even seasoned residents should avoid venturing into flooded areas without proper equipment, team support, and constant vigilance. Social media posts and local news coverage recounted the event in detail, illustrating the hidden dangers of floodwaters and the incredible speed and strength of bull sharks in conditions far outside their typical environment. Community members mourned the loss of a man widely respected for his courage and selflessness, someone who had risked his own life to help others during a natural disaster. The image of his canoe drifting alone in the bayou became a haunting symbol of vulnerability and unpredictability in the midst of rising waters. For Marcus LeBlanc, the bayous that had been a playground, a workplace, and a lifeline for years transformed in moments into a lethal arena where human strength and courage could be rendered insufficient against nature's sudden, uncompromising force. The story of his disappearance circulated widely, shared as both a cautionary tale and a somber tribute, reminding everyone that even knowledge, skill, and careful preparation could meet limits when faced with extreme conditions, displaced predators, and the relentless power of floodwaters, leaving behind only questions, memories, and a lasting warning about the hidden hazards lurking beneath seemingly placid waters. On May 9, 2025, 26-year-old marine biologist Mia Hart slipped silently into the warm, ink-dark waters of the Florida Keys, her headlamp casting a narrow beam that danced over shallow sandbanks while her wetsuit hugged her body, insulated against the slight chill of nighttime currents. She had spent years studying nocturnal fish behavior, fascinated by the unique activity patterns and interactions that unfolded under the cover of darkness, and tonight she had chosen to conduct a solitary snorkel to observe rare species undisturbed, relying on skill, knowledge, and careful preparation to navigate waters that could shift unpredictably with tides and wind. Bioluminescent plankton lit the water around her in ethereal, flickering patterns, a ghostly glow that followed her movements and reflected off tiny scales, creating the illusion that she swam through a field of suspended stars. Each breath through her snorkel was steady, practiced, and deliberate, and her eyes scanned the sand and coral formations below for the small iridescent fish she had been tracking for weeks, their nocturnal emergence both fragile and mesmerizing in the dim light. The bay was quiet, the usual daytime bustle replaced by the soft slap of water and the distant hum of marine life hidden in shadowed crevices. And Mia felt the familiar exhilaration of solitude and observation, attuned to every subtle current and flicker in the water. Then, without warning, a sudden disturbance rippled through the plankton, a shadowy movement that felt disproportionate to the delicate organisms she had been studying. And she turned slightly to find a 6-foot blacktip shark emerging from the darkness. Its sleek body cut through the water with smooth, predatory grace, the faint reflection of her headlamp glinting off its fins. And in an instant it lunged toward her, jaws snapping just inches from her fins and grazing her right calf with a sharp, stinging scrape that sent a jolt of pain and adrenaline surging through her body. The sudden contact made her pulse spike, Muscles tensed instinctively, and the glow of the plankton swirled in chaotic flashes around her, illuminating the predator's shadow as it moved with cautious curiosity. Despite the shock, Mia forced herself to remain vertical in the water, her body aligned, movements controlled, and breathing slow and steady, a practice drilled into her during countless hours of research and safety training for solitary night dives. She froze momentarily, allowing the shark to assess her, maintaining a presence that was neither threatening nor erratic, aware that sudden movements could trigger predatory instincts or provoke a second strike. The blacktip circled once, the fluid motion of its tail cutting through the water as its eyes tracked her, drawn by both the flickering light and the subtle motion of her body, yet hesitant, uncertain whether she was prey, an obstacle, or simply another creature in its nocturnal environment. Seconds stretched like minutes, each one marked by the rhythmic pulsing of her own heartbeat and the quiet, tense dance between observer and predator, until finally, with a flick of its tail and a silent glide, the shark retreated into the shadowed depths, leaving the biologist floating in the glowing aftermath of bioluminescent trails, shaken but unharmed. Mia exhaled slowly, the adrenaline ebbing as she regained composure, her eyes scanning the surrounding water one final time before beginning the measured swim back toward the shoreline. Every stroke was deliberate, maintaining a calm posture, minimizing splashes and sudden movements while keeping her headlamp steady to illuminate the sandbanks and coral formations ahead. The eerie glow of plankton continued to shimmer around her, the water now seeming almost serene despite the earlier tension, and she noted the lesson the encounter had imparted. Even typically small, non-aggressive sharks could become tense or reactive when confronted with unusual stimuli, such as solitary lights, rapid movement, or the unusual presence of a human in their nocturnal territory. The experience reinforced her understanding that respect for marine life, situational awareness, and controlled composure were not just academic concerns, but essential elements for safety when navigating unpredictable environments, especially alone and at night. By the time Mia reached the shallow, sandy shallows near the shore, the moon had risen higher, its silver reflection streaking across the gentle ripples of the water. She pulled herself onto the sand, wetsuit dripping and body still trembling slightly from the encounter. Her right calf bore the faint, stinging graze from the shark's brief contact, a reminder of the immediacy of danger even in research scenarios designed to minimize risk, and she took a moment to breathe, to feel the sand beneath her hands, and to absorb the quiet, reflective calm that returned after moments of extreme tension. In her notebook later, she would describe the encounter in detail, documenting the behavior of the shark, the environmental conditions, and the physiological and psychological reactions she experienced, creating a record not only for scientific analysis but also as guidance for other researchers considering solitary night dives in predator habitats. The incident spread quietly through local diving communities and academic circles, cited as a case study in nocturnal predator behavior and human interaction, demonstrating how controlled, non-threatening responses and careful preparation could prevent injury, even when an apex predator engaged out of curiosity or territorial instinct. Mia herself returned to the field days later, equipped with lessons learned and reinforced caution. Her respect for the fragile balance between researcher and marine life deepened by the night's tense encounter. The glowing waters of the Florida Keys had revealed both wonder and danger in a single fluid motion, teaching a lesson that would remain with her as vividly as the flicker of bioluminescent plankton, tracing her path back to safety, a testament to the high stakes of solitary marine research and the power of calm, deliberate action in moments of extreme vulnerability. On May 21, 2022, 38-year-old veteran wreck diver Olivia Grant descended into the cool blue depths off the Eyre Peninsula in South Australia, accompanied by her two close friends, each carrying full safety gear that included dive knives, emergency sonar, and redundant air systems, aware that this isolated wreck lay far from popular dive sites and presented challenges few recreational divers would attempt. The sun above barely penetrated the water, scattering shards of light through suspended particles, creating an eerie, shifting mosaic across the sea floor and the twisted contours of the sunken vessel resting at 22 meters. Currents flowed unpredictably around the wreck, eddies forming in narrow channels between collapsed sections of hull and scattered debris, and Olivia, experienced and deliberate, moved cautiously, guiding her companions along the shadowed contours while scanning for trapped fish and observing the marine life that had colonized the wreck over the years. The silence of the deep, punctuated only by the hiss of breathing regulators and occasional scraping of gear against metal, wrapped around them, heightening awareness and focus, every movement calculated to maintain safety while exploring the confined and complex structure. Olivia had maneuvered carefully along the port side, her gloved hand tracing corroded railings while her flashlight illuminated patches of sand stirred by currents, when a subtle but unmistakable disturbance rippled through the water. Small fish darted erratically, scattering from shadows and corners, and the faint scent of their panic seemed to linger in the currents like a warning. From the darker recesses of the wreck, a massive 17-foot great white emerged, its body streamlined and powerful, muscles rippling under gray-white skin, eyes fixed with predatory intent on the movement of the divers and the dense schools of fish sheltering among the debris. In an instant, the predator lunged with terrifying precision, clamping its enormous jaws onto Olivia's torso with a force that lifted her from her position and dragged her into the wreck's twisted metal, the noise of suction and crushing impact muffled underwater yet resonating through her body in bone-deep vibrations. Pain and shock surged through her as her companions flailed desperately, slashing with dive knives and sending frantic bubbles into the water to disorient the shark, but the animal's power and speed made their efforts almost useless in the confined space. Olivia's training and experience momentarily steadied her reflexes as she twisted, trying to reduce leverage on the predator and protect vital areas. But the wreck's jagged edges and the sudden, violent surge of the shark created a chaotic dance of metal, sand, and living flesh. Her companions, aware that panic could prove fatal, attempted coordinated strikes, one pressing a knife against the shark's snout, while the other thrust at its flank, their movements precise yet limited by the restricted area and strong currents pressing them against the wreck. Each second stretched endlessly, the water around them churned with sediment and displaced fish, creating a clouded battlefield in which visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the predator's relentless strength continued to dominate, dragging Olivia deeper into the twisted hull where human resistance was met with overwhelming force. The sheer size and power of the great white, combined with the confined space and the currents pushing unpredictably through broken sections of the wreck, made every movement fraught with danger, and despite the diverse skill and determination, there was little they could do to alter the inevitable. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness, marked only by the turbulent clouds of sand and marine detritus that swirled in the water, until finally Olivia's body was separated from her companion's immediate reach, her final struggle absorbed into the shadows of the wreck. The shark, having asserted dominance over the prey and disrupted the intrusion, retreated slowly, slipping back into the surrounding blue with fluid grace, leaving only the remnants of the struggle: displaced debris, scattered fish, and the lingering current of chaos. Rescue divers, alerted by surface support and emergency sonar signals, arrived shortly afterward, but the confined structure and powerful currents had claimed their toll. They recovered only fragments of equipment, and tragically her remains, evidence of the violent, unstoppable force unleashed in a brief and terrifying encounter beyond human control. The divers who witnessed the attack were left haunted by how quickly even meticulous planning, experience, and protective gear could prove powerless in the wild, predator-filled depths. The incident sent shockwaves through the local diving community, emphasizing the lethal risks inherent in atypical sites where wrecks lay isolated. Currents were strong, and confined spaces provided predators an advantage over human movement. Experts noted that great whites, often drawn to scent trails from fish trapped within wrecks, could interpret confined areas and sudden movements as opportunities to strike, and even experienced divers could find themselves overpowered before intervention could be effective. Olivia's reputation as a careful, highly skilled diver underscored the stark lesson. Knowledge, preparation, and safety protocols, though critical, could not eliminate risk entirely when faced with apex predators in environments where the rules of engagement favored them overwhelmingly. The event prompted renewed discussions regarding the necessity of dive teams, enhanced sonar monitoring, and emergency response readiness for exploration of deep and isolated wrecks, reinforcing that even veteran divers were not immune to nature's unpredictability. For her companions, the aftermath was a mixture of grief, trauma, and professional reflection, as they reconstructed the sequence of events and analyzed their own responses under the extreme stress of the attack. The confined wreck, once a place of fascination and scientific interest, became a somber reminder of vulnerability beneath the waves, where human skill met the raw, unmitigated power of an apex predator. Within diving circles, Olivia Grant's story was recounted not only as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to courage and preparedness in the face of extraordinary danger, illustrating that the combination of skill, equipment, and vigilance could sometimes delay catastrophe but could not always prevent the lethal force of a predator acting in its natural element. The attack remained etched in the memory of the Eyre Peninsula diving community, an event that blended tragedy and education, warning divers that isolation, currents, and the presence of apex predators demanded constant respect, awareness, and preparation. Even the most skilled and careful individuals, immersed in environments designed to explore the unknown, could encounter moments where survival depended not just on knowledge, but on fortune, timing, and the unpredictable choices of another powerful creature sharing the same waters. Olivia Grant's final dive became a sobering chapter in the history of South Australian wreck exploration, one that highlighted the razor-thin line between fascination and fatality in the deep, blue, and often unforgiving ocean. On July 14, 2020, a small tourist catamaran carrying 6 passengers was caught unexpectedly in a violent storm off the Bahamas, the sky dark and swollen with clouds, lightning flickering across the horizon as wind and rain tore across the open water. Waves towered and crashed with unpredictable intensity, slamming against the vessel until it capsized, hurling everyone into the churning, salt-filled chaos of the sea, where survival became a battle against both the elements and the unseen predators lurking beneath the surface. Among the group were 28-year-old Maria Santos and her 32-year-old friend Daniel Reyes, both strong swimmers and familiar with recreational water activities, but unprepared for the sudden combination of storm, overturning vessel, and predator presence. Cold shock seized their muscles as they struggled to stay afloat, gripping floating debris in each other, their minds racing to maintain orientation in the relentless swell while the wind tore at their hair and salt water stung their eyes. The water around them teemed with a mixture of floating fragments from the catamaran, overturned life jackets, and personal belongings, creating a chaotic, shifting field that rippled with every thrash and kick. The storm had stirred not only the human passengers but also the marine environment, drawing the attention of a 10-foot oceanic white-tip shark, a predator normally found in deep water yet opportunistic when presented with vulnerable prey near the surface. The shark surged with powerful fluid strokes, its dorsal fin cutting through the waves, eyes fixed on the movement and scent of blood and panic. In an instant, it lunged toward Maria, its jaws clamping onto her left calf with terrifying speed, tearing through wetsuit and skin, pain exploding through her leg as she screamed, kicking frantically while desperately trying to pull herself away from the powerful animal. Salt water flooded her mouth and eyes as her body writhed, adrenaline and shock propelling her movements even as the pain threatened to overwhelm her senses. Seconds later, the shark snapped again, this time grazing Daniel's arm, leaving deep lacerations that sent his blood mixing with Maria's in the foamy, rolling surf. The predator circled, testing the group, its behavior deliberate, drawn by both movement and scent, assessing whether the humans were viable prey or too dangerous to pursue further. Panic surged through the group, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity, and every movement risked provoking the predator into renewed attack. Maria and Daniel, driven by instinct, kicked, splashed, and bashed floating debris against the shark's snout and side, attempting to disorient and repel it while keeping themselves afloat and avoiding further injury. The chaos was total. Waves towered unpredictably, salt stung eyes and lungs, and the presence of the shark forced every decision to be instantaneous, measured only by immediate survival needs. For approximately 40 minutes, the group battled both nature and predator, each breath a victory, each kick a temporary reprieve. Maria clung to a small section of railing from the capsized catamaran while Daniel maintained a loose formation nearby, eyes constantly tracking the circling white tip, heart pounding with the rhythm of fear and effort. The shark struck intermittently, circling with fluid grace yet hesitant to engage further once met with resistance, leaving wounds that were immediate and visible but failing to completely incapacitate the pair. Each collision with the predator sent shockwaves through their muscles and nerves, The pain intense, yet accompanied by the awareness that freezing, panicking, or losing focus would mean disaster. Their companions, battered by waves and wind, added chaotic splashes and strikes to keep the predator occupied, creating a tense, dynamic scene where human coordination, instinct, and luck intersected with the lethal efficiency of a top predator in its element. Finally, the roar of an engine cut across the storm-lashed water, a fishing boat emerging through the sheets of rain and high surf. The crew maneuvered carefully among the floating debris, throwing lines and hooks while shouting guidance over wind and waves. Maria and Daniel, exhausted, bleeding, and barely able to maintain vertical posture in the swells, latched onto ropes and life rings, hauling themselves onto the relative safety of the boat's deck. Relief was immediate, yet tempered by lingering shock and pain, as the adrenaline subsided and the full gravity of the injuries became apparent. Lacerations on Maria's left calf were deep and ragged, while Daniel's arm bore long scratches and bruising, their bodies covered with saltwater, cuts, and sand, each movement a reminder of the sustained struggle against both storm and predator. Once safely aboard, medics applied urgent first aid, stabilizing blood loss and treating the wounds while the storm began to ease, leaving only the occasional swell and whispering wind as testimony to the violence that had passed. The incident quickly drew attention from marine biologists and local authorities, who noted the unusual behavior of the oceanic whitetip, a species typically found in open, deep waters yet capable of opportunistic aggression when humans are vulnerable and conditions chaotic. Reports emphasize that while these sharks are generally non-aggressive towards surface swimmers, extreme weather, overturned vessels, and the presence of thrashing prey can provoke responses that are dangerous and unpredictable, transforming a recreational outing into a high-stakes confrontation with apex predator behavior. For Maria and Daniel, the attack was more than a physical ordeal. It became a study in resilience, composure, and survival instinct, each second of controlled movement and calculated response a measure of their will to live. The memory of the shark's sudden lunges, the chaotic spinning of waves, and the frantic thrashing of debris would remain etched in their minds, a vivid reminder of how quickly familiar environments can turn perilous under extreme circumstances. Lessons from the event spread throughout the local tourist and diving communities, highlighting the necessity of life jackets, coordinated group activity, emergency signaling, and maintaining calm under duress, and reinforcing that even small groups in seemingly controlled recreational settings can encounter lethal danger when predator behavior intersects with chaos and vulnerability. The survivors eventually received comprehensive medical treatment, their physical wounds healing over weeks while the psychological impact lingered, a blend of trauma and awe at having endured a confrontation with one of the ocean's most formidable predators. The Bahamas incident became a case study for ocean safety experts, illustrating how environmental factors, human vulnerability, and predator opportunity can align to produce a moment of extreme risk, and how vigilance, composure, and coordinated response can mean the difference between life and death in open water.